Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Hopefully you'll excuse the background noise, I have construction going on in 3 directions. So, today's ink is, as you might be able to tell, by MontBlanc. However, let me intro with, usually when you find it in a bottle, the bottle looks like this. And usually when you find it in cartridges, it looks like this, if I could open it, but it doesn't want to open right now. What's that about? Anyways, and then in Europe you usually find them in boxes like this. However, I don't have this ink in any of those forms. I have it at the bottom of this, because I've been given so many of them that I just put them in there. It's MontBlanc Purple, which is what I call it, because on the European boxes that I was given it's called purple. In the US it's called lavender. So, here we go. Chromatography. As you can see, and this is pretty common for a lot of MontBlanc inks, there's this dark gray that stays at the bottom. Then you get this really bright, vibrant pink. And then a nice, rich, dark purple up at the top. It's a very interesting purple. I'm not a big fan of purples generally, but there's something about this one that's kind of appealing to me. So the tests were done in this Waterman Hemisphéré with a fine nib. And this is an obscenely fine nib. Like, I'd say it's an extra fine. It's not marked. And this Hero 616, I emptied out a bunch of cartridges and put them in here, with a very broad, very wet nib, and I love it in this pen, but I knew it wouldn't be fair on most of the paper tests, so hence the Hemisphéré. Speaking of paper tests, top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. 6 seconds to dry in the Hemisphéré, and 16 seconds to dry in the Hero 616. I hope you can see just how wet this must have been. I mean, look at how dark it is here versus here. So it's a beautiful, rich, dark purple. And even though the fine nib is obscenely fine, you still get decent shading through the writing. Yeah, I said rich color, good flow, no feathering, no spread, no sheen was seen. It did dye the paper a bit. But as you can see under that dyed paper, that's still fairly readable. I'm actually impressed because a lot of times MontBlanc inks really not that water resistant because they're supposed to clean out of your fancy pens very easily. Look at that. Even on that super dark, super broad 616, nothing. So that's impressive to me. Next is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. Look at how gorgeous and dark that is. Sorry, I love wet pens. I love broad wet pens, so this looks great to me. And you still get some shading. Like here you see at the bottom of the W or at the end of the S. And then in this really fine writing, you still get shading, which is very nice. But yeah, 15 seconds to dry in the obscenely wet one. 5 seconds to dry in the very, very thin one. Water test, again, dyed the paper. But again, it's fairly dark where the ink is under that dyed paper, even on the fine nib, so that's pretty impressive. And no bleed through, except I think that's actually from me putting it down on the next page, which is Tomoe River Paper, which, oh look, already I don't even need to try it. Look at all that sheen. There's this bright gold coppery sheen going on in the wettest places. So of course it's in the scrubby, but you see it in the letters too. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that on camera, but yeah, there is just sheen everywhere where you lay it on thick. Yeah, I'm going to try it. Yeah, so, but 16 seconds to dry, 8 seconds to dry. Again, you get decent shading even in the fine writing. You don't get much shading in the thick dark one. You get a little, but you know, not a lot. Water test is fairly impressive considering this is Tomoe River and it loves to let just ink slide away. But even the extra fine nib under that dyed paper, there's still some there. I mean, granted this is easier to read because there was more ink put down, but yeah, there's some echo with the really broad nib, but the fine nib really isn't too bad, so. Next is the 20-pound copier paper. Come on, camera, what are you doing? Now, here I wrote the top up in the broad nib, but I knew that was just going to be, you know. So 2 seconds to dry, which really isn't too bad. But there's bleed, and which is sad because even with this extremely fine nib, the fact that there's still bleed, and it got so much bigger. If you look at the line difference, I mean, this starts to really look like a medium. Or, I mean, considering this generally looks like an extra fine, and this looks like a medium, that's pretty bad. But I do kind of love this water test, I'm not going to lie. I mean, again, you can see what's at the center is very dark, it's very there, which, again, for a fine nib is quite impressive. But then there's so much color moving around, it's almost pretty. But, yeah, there's bleed. The light is making it difficult because it's so many tiny dots, but, yeah. So, next is Mead Notebook Paper, where it took 2 seconds to dry. I said bleed through only in spots, which for this paper, it's so thin and it's so cheap. I actually found that quite impressive. And I felt like the color was still very, you know, jovially purple and bright. And, yeah, not much feather or spread. It's still a very fine line. That's fairly readable. It did explode a little, did feather a little, it did dye the paper a little, but it could be a heck of a lot worse. Okay, up there, that was the Hero 616, but look at that. Almost nothing came through, and what did come through came through at the edge, which makes me think it has something to do with the pressing of the paper, so. And last is Moleskine paper, where it took 5 seconds to dry. And I was really not impressed. I mean, you get like a teeny bit of shading still. Not a lot. It did spread a bit. It starts to look almost like a medium. The water test really wasn't that impressive. I would have expected more to stay, considering what we saw in the other tests. Dyed the paper, it exploded. And that's actually a good bit of bleed through, considering how absolutely tiny this nib is. It's the smallest one I have. Yeah, it's way finer than my Lamy Extra Fine. It's so not a good showing. So there you go. That's an ink by MontBlanc. In this case, it's get that out of there. It's lavender or purple. I'm not a big fan of purple inks usually, and I'm generally not impressed with a lot of MontBlanc inks because they tend to be a bit watery and they don't hold up to water because, you know, you have to rinse them out of your fancy pens. But this one really impressed me. It had good shading, it had decent water resistance, it didn't behave very well in the cheapest papers, but, you know, it's, honestly, I don't go in for that anyway. If I'm going to use a fountain pen, I'm going to use it on nice paper, so. Anyways, for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. Bye.